What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where me and my good friend Danny Torkel over there discuss horror movies and streaming shows. Oh boy, what a month it has been leading up to today. Danny's been pretty much covering different versions of the Wolfman story, whether it's the classic Wolfman movie, the Benicio del Toro movie from the early 2000s, and now today's Wolfman 2025, directed by Leigh Whannell. Danny, do you remember what your number one movie was for our very first top 10 of the year?
Yes, the first year that we started this channel was the cursed year of 2020, and my favorite horror movie of that year was Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man, which was his very modern take on a Universal Monsters classic. And here we are 5 years later, reviewing a Leigh Whannell very modern update of a Universal Monsters classic.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. I love that Invisible Man movie. That was in my top 10 as well. I know it was your number one. But his filmography in general is really interesting to me. He's written movies. He's only directed four now with Wolfman. Um, but he's directed Insidious Chapter 3, Upgrade, which I love Upgrade too.
Upgrade's awesome.
The Invisible Man, obviously, and Wolfman. Did you see Insidious Chapter 3?
Yeah, I saw all the Insidious movies up until the last one, which I heard, which was directed by, um, oh God, the actor from the Conjuring movies and the Insidious movies. I think he directed that one.
Oh my god, what's his name? I fucking love him too. What is his name?
Yeah,
I'll look
yeah,
him up real quick.
good.
Yeah,
Brain farting. But I think all the Insidious movies, from the original to part four, are pretty good.
yeah.
I started the fifth one, didn't finish it. Weirdly, I would probably rank Insidious Chapter 3 as the last uh, in my ranking, but not because of any of its faults, and more because I just think one and two are amazing, and four is really, really good.
Okay.
So I think Insidious Chapter 3 just kind of suffers from being the least awesome of a four pack of really good to great movies. But Upgrade, like you said, was awesome.
Yes.
Uh, had a crazy ending that like kind of sticks with you.
Yep.
And then The Invisible Man, I genuinely loved. I thought it was such an interesting modern take, and that's why I was really, really excited. Usually, and like we've made this point now for a few years. Usually December flips to January, and you know that you're going to get absolute dog shit for about 6 weeks. Usually, maybe you'll get a good February, mid February release. Uh, then you get into the spring months, and obviously the calendar starts peaking with better films. But last year, the first horror movie I saw in the movie theater was Night Swim.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I remember a couple of years ago, I went to the movies in January, and the only thing that was out horror related was the American remake of The Grudge. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember that the movie started, and within about a minute, I decided I'm going to leave and go see Greta Gerwig's Little Women, which was an amazingly good decision because that was a great movie, got nominated for Best Picture that year. And
Right.
I'm much happier that I saw Greta Gerwig's Little Women than the American remake of The Grudge. So to get a January horror film that I was really excited about from a director who I have known now, his filmography, writing and directing for 20 years,
Right.
which is wild.
Right.
Freaking,
We're old.
co-writer of Saw.
Right.
Um, I was really excited.
Yeah. Well, you said co-writer of Saw. It's interesting because he co-wrote this movie as well. He wrote it with Corbett Tuck. That's his wife, and she's been in a bunch of movies too, right? And also, just to backtrack, Patrick Wilson is from The Conjuring, and
Wilson. I
yeah, well, it's okay. He's one of my favorite actors. I should have known his
Yeah,
name.
we're getting older, and
Yeah,
like every time that I watch something, something has
yeah,
to come out.
right.
It's
Like yeah, like Kelly Bundy, basically. Like, one thing goes okay.
Yeah,
But anyway, I think that having his wife on the film I think that really helps strengthen the female character in this movie, the female main character. But before we even get into that discussion, I wanted to talk about my two favorite types of horror movies. I saw this movie with my mom in the theater. I sound like a weirdo, but me and my mom loves horror movies. I saw it with her, and then I left the theater asking her, "What are your top 10 favorite horror movies of all time?" And then I started to kind of list off mine, and I realized that my favorite horror movies kind of fall into two categories, right? The first category, I think you'll probably be able to guess, Danny, but it's basically horror movies where they're like beautifully shot. There's some amazing shots. The background's amazing. Just great cinematography. And then like maybe not that much dialogue. And also there's this key element where you don't know necessarily what's happening. Like no one comes in and is like, this is because this is a Spectrum 3 poltergeist. Like no one does that kind of shit, right? Like it's ambiguous. Then the other favorite type is like the kind of over the top, crazy, weird creatures, like just weird over the top horror where it's like zany, like let's say like Evil Dead 2 or something like that. Or like The Substance, like where it's just like you kind of can't believe what you're seeing. It doesn't necessarily have to be super gory, and it also doesn't have to be scary. Like I love Blade 2. I consider Blade 2 to be a horror movie, and that's not scary at all. So those are my two favorite types of horror movies. Do you think that your favorites kind of fit in there at all?
I mean, you mentioned Evil Dead 2 is definitely in my top 5. The Substance is my favorite. Spoiler alert for our top 10. I haven't really made this much of a secret, but
Yeah.
The Substance is my favorite movie of the year.
Right.
Horror, non-horror, it's my favorite movie of the year. And I to your point, I do. There is this amazing feeling when you've seen as many movies as I have, especially horror movies, and you're watching something that you genuinely like. Wow, I can't fucking believe what I am seeing.
Right.
There's this amazing feeling there, and I feel like there's a reason why Dream Warriors is still one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's because I saw it when I was really young and it's just stuck with me. Like Freddy's head coming out of the television. And some of those scenes with with the glove with the needles on it, those stuck with me. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The puppet kill in that movie, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Evil Dead 2, so over the top, so ridiculous and wonderful. I mean, and then there's, for me, it's also, my top 3 is probably Jaws, The Thing,
Right.
and Halloween. And it's
Right.
like a combination of just atmosphere, music, just all-time amazing direction with tremendous lead performances, well-written characters that are in conflict with each other, especially The Thing and Jaws.
Right.
And yeah, so I guess like that kind of conflicts. I was interested. In terms of movies that scare me a lot. I always say cult movies scare me, and also things that potentially could happen in real life. And weirdly, I liked the way Wolfman started because it kind of put that into a real world setting. This isn't your grandfather's Wolfman movie. This isn't like there's no there's no, I don't want to say there's no transformation because obviously there is, but having watched the 1941, having watched the 2010 version, having watched American Werewolf in London, there's the transformation. Like when you think of Wolfmen, and werewolves, the thing that ties it all back together is the full moon. Full moon triggers the change. And what I loved about this movie is I don't even think you see the moon in the movie, which is really weird because there's a movie poster for this movie that very prominently features the moon. And it's like a red herring because I don't think you see the moon in this movie. And so I did like aspects of Wolfman in the sense that it was giving me something that I felt was genuinely original.
Really, really excellent point. I don't think you see the moon, just like you said. And we're 10 minutes in at this point, so I think we can go ahead and start with our spoilers. So, guys, if you haven't seen Wolfman 2025, why don't you pause this video, eventually see the movie, and come back? But I mean, they show a Wolfman like during the day, like twice in the movie.
So what
Good.
Since we're talking about spoilers, the thing that makes this movie so unique is that it appears in this movie that, so I see you have it on the bottom, like lycanthropy is a virus. There's like this opening crawl that kind of ties it back to like Native American indigenous
Right.
peoples.
Right.
So I like that in the sense. It almost felt a little Stephen King Pet Sematary-ish.
Okay.
Where where you kind of get into that trope of like, oh, the Native American burial ground or the Native American curse,
Right.
But what I really liked in this movie is that we've come to expect from 80 years of film that you get bitten by a werewolf and you're fine. And then on the full moon, you transform. And then when the moon goes down, you're back to normal. You wake up under a bridge. How the fuck did I get here? And this movie, what Winnell does is he basically says, no, once you get bitten by a werewolf, you're infected and you are now a wolf man. You are going to transform into this wolf-like humanoid creature, and that's it. You're done.
Yeah.
You're not.
Yeah.
The daylight comes. You're a wolf man. The moon goes down. You're a wolf man. You will live as a man wolf man in the woods for the rest of your life until somebody shoots you and kills you. And I think that's like the first time that's ever been posited in movies.
Yeah.
Like this idea that like werewolfism or wolfman lycanthropy as a incurable virus that you transform one time and that's it. Like your transformation takes time. It builds. We see it, systematically throughout the movie. Like he gets worse and worse, but he's never going back. And I think that's I don't even know if it's my complaint, but my biggest observation about this movie is that it felt like it just went so fast.
I agree. Yeah, it's a pretty short movie too.
It's like 95 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
And this movie does like, I think the longest part of the movie for me was like the opening 10 minutes.
Yes.
Because once you get to Christopher Abbott and her name is Julia Garner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you get to the two of them going to Oregon to, clean up his father's estate, the movie is like car crash, attack, run to the house. And then almost instantly he can't talk. And he's starting to like become, this isn't like a slow transformation. It's not like, this movie reminded me more than any other movie of a combination of like a 28 Days Later, Night of the Living Dead. Because really, so think about it. You're in a farmhouse. Most of the movie is in a farmhouse where you're trying to prevent some kind of humanoid monster from breaking in. So that immediately made me think of the original 1968 Night of the Living Dead.
Sure.
And then there's the idea that the person in the house with you is infected. The person in the house with you is infected and is changing. And if they touch you or if they get at you, you might become infected, which is basically zombie lore more than it's werewolf lore.
Right.
And so this whole movie felt like a Wolfman transformation, but with a zombie presence to it.
Yeah.
And it, it all just happens so quickly. And what's interesting is I saw a couple of reviews, and we mentioned this before we started recording.
Yeah.
The reviews of this movie are kind of all over the place. Chris Stuckman, for one, he liked it. He liked it a lot, but he also had some issues with the fact that, like, emotionally the movie just kind of goes quickly and ends without like a real emotional send off. It just kind of ends. Uh,
Mhm.
Whereas Cody Leach, who's another YouTube film
Right.
critic that I
Right.
enjoy,
Me too.
he didn't like it. His thumbnail is woof. And
Oh.
so and I walked out of this movie and my first thought was, boy, this is going to be a divisive movie. Like like before I even came up with the idea of, like, do I really like this? Do I not really like this? I I just kind of felt in my bones that this was going to be a divisive movie because of its take on werewolf lore, or its complete denial of werewolf lore,
Right.
and because of the, I don't want to say the pacing, but just how fast everything happens in the movie.
Yeah. No, no, I agree with you 100%. Um, I just saw a thumbnail when I was getting this video ready. It said Wolf Ma. Wolf Ma. Um, I actually really liked this movie. I know we were kind of talking about, like, well, how do you feel? I really liked this movie. I can understand why some people would be bothered by it. And you've made some really great points where it's like really quick and going once they get to Oregon. I actually really, really enjoyed the few scenes that we had in whatever city that was that they were living in, where you see like Christopher Abbott and his daughter bonding. For
I,
me, it's
assume, I assume it's the Pacific Northwest only because, like, they drive to rural Oregon. So
right,
I'm assuming it was like, I don't know, big city Washington, maybe like Seattle, or
right.
uh, what, Tacoma, Wacoma. Maybe
Port
it's like a big city in Washington.
Yeah, it could have been
Because
like Portland. Go
well,
ahead.
if it was Portland, Oregon, they wouldn't have driven into, like, it very clearly says "Welcome to Oregon." So I'm like, oh,
Oh,
okay. Maybe
very
they live in like Northern California. I don't know.
yeah, yeah. Good. Yeah, really good point. But so like for me, like I really like that scene. But the thing is, I felt like you kind of know everything that's going to happen when you see this movie. You kind of know everything that's going to happen when you see the trailer, which that's not uncommon for horror movies. But even if you know what's going to happen in a movie, it's the way that it's told that makes it a good movie or not. Like it's like, okay, I know this story beat's going to happen, this story beat's going to happen, but I just like the way they've made this shot. I like the music. I like this performance. And so like in the very beginning, we start off with a flashback with Christopher Abbott and his father, and they're hunters in this Oregon wilderness. And then there's this one shot where you have this like giant valley, right? And the father and son look at the valley and they kind of take a moment to reflect and stuff. And I had kind of like a moment that like you have all the time, Danny. I sat there and I was like, okay, that's how the movie's gonna end. They're gonna look into this valley, and it's like, oh, he's gonna get infected by the virus. It's gonna be really difficult, but they're gonna kill him to get away from him. He's probably gonna do a thing where he like puts the gun to his head like he's in The Fly or something, and
I
then that's it.
I'm so glad you said that, because that was the other movie. That was the other movie where I'm watching this and I'm like, this is not a Wolfman movie. This is Night of the Living Dead. This is The Fly, but in the setting of Night of the Living Dead.
Right.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I had that exact same thought where I almost said to myself, is he gonna do The Fly ending? Yeah, great call. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you kind of know every beat how this is going to go down. Maybe there's just some little touches, some little differences that make it exciting, that make it more compelling. Because you've seen this story, it's just this version of it. And one of the things I really liked was his experience changing into a werewolf. I really liked that, like at first, okay, one of my favorite scenes in the whole fucking movie is he hears this noise that sounds like this kind of thumping, right? And then he goes into the bedroom and he sees this spider, and the spider's legs are what's making this tremendous noise. Really love that. Then there's this kind of barrier where his wife will be talking to him, and it'll sound like she's like muttering or something, but it sounds weird, and the volume is all off, and the words don't make any sense. Then he'll be saying stuff to her, and even though he seems like he's trying to say something, it's just like muttering. Then probably one of the standout parts, I think a part that people are going to really remember from this movie is his sort of like werewolf vision. And I just thought that was so cool. Like what he saw when he was a werewolf. What'd you think of that?
So my favorite part of that is that it's not done as a cheap effect. It's, I don't know if you noticed, but like the camera just kind of pans around. So like you're looking at Julia Garner like frantically talking to her husband. He and all of a sudden, without any camera cuts, you start like her voice becomes muddled, and then the camera glosses over and you see like his enhanced Wolfman vision,
Right.
And what I really liked about that is it didn't feel like a camera trick or an editing trick. It felt like a really unique thing that Whannell had thought up, where we're going to do this all in camera. And again, credit to Whannell. We made a point, when talking about the 2010 Wolfman, how the Wolfman himself looks great because it's practical Rick Baker makeup, but then the transformation looks fucking shitty as hell because it's garbage CGI.
Right.
It makes you think of American Werewolf in Paris instead of American Werewolf in London.
Oof.
And this movie is completely practical. The makeup looks amazing. Because he literally at points, he looks almost like a leper. He looks like he's dying in real time. Right. And like so much credit goes to the makeup team, but also to Christopher Abbott, because you lose him in this movie. Like he doesn't even, by about the 40-minute mark, he doesn't even look like Christopher Abbott anymore.
No.
And you talk about, like we mentioned Patrick Wilson when we remembered his name.
Right.
Christopher Abbott is very quietly building a pretty awesome horror resume. He was in a couple of very weird indie horror movies called Piercing, Sanctuary. He was in They Are Still Here, You Are Still Here. Not Don't Go Out at Night, but
it comes at night.
Yeah, that one. It Comes at Night. He's been in a lot of, he was in Possessor. So he's building this like really cool horror resume. I don't know if you noticed the moving truck is Pierce moving, which has to be a reference to Jack Pierce, who did the makeup for all the Universal monsters.
Oh, that's cool. Okay.
And I've seen an interview with Leigh Whannell where he not so subtly hints that the daughter's name is a very clear reference to Ginger Snaps.
Oh, okay. That's cool too. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, I feel like people could be put off by the way that he looks, right? Because it's not really like your typical Wolfman. I think the main reason why is because his head itself is kind of bald, whereas you expect it to have this big like puff of hair. You kind of think of the what do you call it? The original 1941 Wolfman. That's what you initially picture. Then you kind of picture just like giant hulking wolfmen in suit, well, not suits, but like, big costumes and makeup. And this is, like you said, like a leper. And he's not the only wolfman that we see in this movie as well. His father, spoilers, is the one that infects him, And, they had images from like the Universal Studios, like Horror Nights, and they showed a wolfman there. I think it kind of looks like the dad, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and that a lot of people like freaked out about that and
Hmm.
were complaining, and it's like I think it comes back to the idea that like a lot of people are gonna walk into this movie with Wolfman/werewolf expectations, and they're not going to get their typical, 80 years of history Wolfman. We've talked about, a werewolf versus a wolfman, 2 legs versus 4 legs. Like even American Werewolf in London, when he transforms, he becomes basically a giant wolf monster.
Right,
Um,
right,
and then there's like bipedal werewolves that look like giant wolves, like Silver Bullet, right?
right, right, right.
Um, like he doesn't have much human left. He's basically a giant standing wolf. But then you have like Wolfman is like he looks like a wolf, but he's standing on 2 legs and he's still wearing clothes.
Right, right, right.
Like Monster Squad. To me, Wolfman's got nards. That was a classic Wolfman.
Of course.
And and in many ways, like he just doesn't look like that. And yeah, like I there was never a doubt in my mind as to who that first Wolfman was. The father, taking us back to something from Mike Flanagan, the father is like pronounced dead in absentia. And so it's like, oh, okay. The father, like the last time we see him in that like opening scene, he's talking about how he's going to go back out and look for him. Um, and he spends like his life looking for this monster. But I liked what I liked in that opening part is like, Christopher Abbott's character Blake is like his entire role is, yeah, I like you basically exactly what I like the idea of like he has this relationship with his daughter where him and his daughter are obviously closer than the
Right,
daughter is with the mom.
right.
But at the same time, we literally witness him like lose his temper, and like he's like fighting with his like DNA of like he had like a verbally abusive father. So he's trying not to be that verbally abusive father. And then, of course, he gets scratched by the werewolf, and now he's becoming an actual monster who's trying to like kill his daughter. I thought that was, by the way, the best scare in the movie is when they're in the house and they think he's outside, and Julia Garner's walking around, and like you see him in the background coming down the stairs, and then they turn and the daughter's there and you just see him on the floor behind her. I thought that was such a cool scare moment.
Totally agree.
Um, I there were a lot of parts of this movie that I like really liked from that perspective.
Yeah,
Like I'm a dad. We're both dads. We have little girls that are probably a little bit older now. Well,
yeah.
Pepper's
Clementine.
probably older, but Clementine is probably the age of the Ginger in this
Right,
movie.
right.
And like I know, and this is with no, I'm not putting my wife on blast at all when I say this, but like I Charlotte and I are like we're fucking peas in a pod. Like
Yes, me and Clementine.
yeah, we
Yeah.
will we do everything together. And Charlotte does things with Athena, but like I'm also weirdly the parent who, when I get annoyed, I'm the one who's most likely to raise his voice. So I really kind of identified a lot with Christopher Abbott's character at the beginning of this movie,
Yeah.
where I'm like, oh, great relationship with his daughter, but also gets annoyed and loses his temper all the time. And I'm like, okay.
Yep.
So
Yep. Yeah. I mean, honestly, Danny, that's what made me really relate to this movie too. Like the little girl, even though she doesn't look anything like my daughter Clementine, she reminded me of my daughter Clementine, and then his relationship with her. And like I said, we know all these story beats. So I'm sitting here and I'm like,
I'm
oh,
recording
okay.
a podcast. I'll talk to you later.
Oh,
Yeah.
by the way, for those of you that are listening as a
Yeah.
podcast, Danny is
Yeah.
just sitting in his car And I don't know if maybe like a cop or something walked up to him or
No,
something.
no, no. That's one of my good friends from work.
Oh,
I'm sitting in the like I get yeah, I'm sitting in the parking lot at work. I start work at 9 o'clock. I'm doing weekend tutoring, and one of my good friends just like knocked on the door, and I was like, I'm doing my podcast, and he was like, "Are you really?" And I was like,
yeah.
"Yeah, yeah, really."
Yeah. Well, what I was gonna say is that like I knew from that scene when they're in the city and she does the thing where she like touches his head and he's like, "Tell me what I'm thinking." I'm like, okay, that's what's gonna happen in the movie at one point. She's gonna do that probably at the end when he dies, which she does do when he dies. She also does it another time when he's kind of overcome with the virus. She like kind of goes to like touch his head. Um, like that's I knew. I was like, oh great, so we're gonna watch this dad and this daughter that have this great relationship. We're gonna watch like him try to attack her and then them ultimately have to kill him. Great, looking forward to that, right?
But I
You were talking.
think that is probably the only Wolfman trope that Lee Winnell uses, and that is that from the 1941 movie on, Wolfmen are traditionally the most tragic of the Universal monsters.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Frankenstein is misunderstood, the monster is misunderstood. Dracula's a vampire, but like the from Lon Chaney to Benicio del Toro and all werewolves and wolfmen in between, they're tragic figures. They were attacked. They did not willingly become, or they were not created by a scientist. They did not willingly get seduced by a vampire. They were attacked by a creature that infected them, and by no fault of their own, they become a monster that ends up attacking their loved ones and inevitably gets killed by their loved ones. I mean, 1941, the ending of the movie is his father,
yeah,
uh, played by Claude Rains, uh, beats him to death with the silver wolf cane. Uh, in the 2010 movie, Benicio del Toro basically allows Emily Blunt to shoot him and kill him, and that's the werewolf Wolfman movies always have this like level of like tragic lead character, tragic protagonist who we know no matter how much we might like relate to them, they're going to become a wolfman and they're going to end up getting killed by one of their loved ones. And it can suck, but that's literally, I think, the only werewolf trope that Lee Winnell borrowed from any previous Wolfman movie.
yeah. I agree. And you know what? It's going to hurt you if the filmmaker is doing their job right. If it's a well-made movie, then when the loved one has to kill the werewolf, it's really going to hurt, and it did in this movie. So it's kind of funny, Danny. You just brought up the Benicio del Toro version, the original version. Um, like, there's no other version of this kind of Wolfman story besides like these three Universal versions, right? I mean, I know there's like werewolf movies and there's a bunch of them, but like kind of like the Wolf Man, there's only like three the Wolfmans, right?
Well, the Wolfman, Lon Chaney's Wolfman, appeared in other Universal horror movies.
Right, that's a good point.
But yeah, but like in terms of like most of the time they do werewolf movies, it's werewolf, more werewolf than Wolfman.
Right.
Like obviously, like I mentioned, Monster Squad. And even in Monster Squad, the guy, Uncle, what's his name
Oh shit! Like, oh fuck, I'm gonna look it up.
in
You're
Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll look that up. But yeah, yeah, he's the one that dies in that. Yeah,
Yeah, he's like a tragic character in that. He's like screaming about how he wants to die most of the movie.
yeah.
And like at the end, when he dies, I think he's like,
Thank
I
you.
think he dies with a smile on his face.
Yeah, I think he says thank you. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Uncle Rico. That's what it
Uncle
is.
Rico. I bet I could throw a
Yeah.
football over those mountains. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, what I was gonna say was there's these three versions then, and if you guys ever want to hear my take on the original version, and I did it on Mike Bongiorno's Pop Culture Man Children that came out in like October for like his Halloween videos. Danny has covered the Wolfman on here. But you like out of those three versions, the original black and white one, the Benicio del Toro one, and now this one, what would you consider your favorite of the three?
I mean, I obviously I love the Lon Chaney movie. I mean, I don't love the 2010 movie. I think Benicio del Toro is probably the best part of it, but I like I would probably go with, as far as, I mean, I identify more with this one because Lon Chaney was kind of like a weird, creepy, peeping Tom.
Right,
Uh,
right.
but there's also like the level of tragedy there with his, he's there to because his brother died.
Right.
So it, yeah, I don't know. I'd probably go with the 1941 movie. There's something just really wonderful about a movie that's an hour and 9 minutes long that is so iconic.
Yeah.
But this, I enjoyed this. I thought I would watch this again
Yep.
before the 2010 movie.
Oh yeah.
I,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, my favorite werewolf movie of all time is, as I'm sure it is for most people, American
Right.
Werewolf in London. But
Right.
even that movie that movie is tragic.
Yeah.
You have these two guys, like they're two schnooks walking around. They get attacked. One of them's dead and becomes a hilarious ghost who spends the rest of the movie telling our lead character to shoot himself. Like it's like, yeah, he's funny that the ghost keeps showing up, but Jack is telling David to kill himself the whole movie. David ends up falling in love with the nurse, and then the nurse tells the werewolf she loves him, shoots him, and then the movie just ends with him laying dead in the street. It like goes straight to credits. So it's like there's no Wolfman movie I can think of that has like a happy ending that has so with vampires, there's always this allure of like, ooh, would I ever want to be a vampire? Vampires are sexy. They live forever.
Yes.
Most of us grew up watching Buffy, and it's like, oh, vampires can hang out with like the cool kids.
We would
Uh,
cover Interview with the Vampire.
yeah. And it's like wolfmen are like, oh, now I'm going to become a monster that is not only am I going to become a monster, but it's going to be the most painful thing that anyone's ever lived through. And
Right.
then I'm going to attack my family, and then one of the people who I love the most in the world is going to kill me. Like, who would ever sign up for that? It's like,
Oh
yeah,
man.
I think there's a reason why of like Frankenstein, Dracula, and Wolfman, like Frankenstein and Dracula are like vampire and creature movies are near constants every year. I want
Yes.
to bring a loved one back from the dead. I want to, I want to live forever. I want to be a sexy blood-sucking vampire. But
Hmm.
but at the same time, you're like, you think of wolfmen and werewolves, and you're like, nah, that doesn't sound fun. Nothing about this is enjoyable.
Oh man. No, you bring up some great points there. I mean, it's gonna be rough, but you still watch it. And if we compare the 1941 movie to this one, the 1941 movie like looks fucking beautiful. The
Oh yeah.
cinematography in that movie is amazing. And this movie has some amazing cinematography. You mentioned before your favorite jump scare with it had that scene with the daughter. My favorite one is when we're looking through his vision and they're in the barn and like they're just standing there right in front of his face, but he can see them because he has that vision. And then then he eventually jumps at them and it's this great jump scare too. There's this other part where like he's like fully infected and he goes outside and he looks into the woods and he hears like the wolf man kind of howl and the woods like lights up like it's completely like it's daytime. You know, I fucking love that too.
Yeah.
What I know you have to go to your job and stuff in a second too, but what I was gonna say was that you know, when it comes to Wolfman movies, there is always that tragedy, but then there's just like that. It's sort of that like kind of that excitement where it's like, is he going to actually kill the other person? Is he going to? I was truly worried that he might actually infect his daughter. You know, at one point, I knew it wasn't that kind of movie. Like I knew it was just going to end with him dying. But I was like, well, it is kind of like a virus, like you said. And I think that was a really good comparison to like zombie movies and stuff. But bringing up my last point before you go into your job is this was part of Universal's, like it was supposed to be part of their Dark Universe, which is just this big failed cinematic universe, right? Do you think that they're ever going to try to like tie together Leigh Whannell's indie horror movies, like his Invisible Man suit, this Wolfman virus, which they call it, the Native Americans call it the face of the wolf. Do you think we're ever going to have like a movie with these kind of characters together?
No,
Okay.
I don't. I don't at all. But what I will say, and what I hope happens, is I hope every couple of years we get a new original Leigh Whannell Universal Monsters modern adaptation.
Yeah. I mean, he could even fucking make Frankenstein. I mean, Upgrade, you just kind of make something like in the vein of Upgrade, Frankenstein.
Yeah. You could do that. You know, I'd be interested to see like his take on modern vampires. I mean, vampires have been done so much and in so many, like I think of Larry Fessenden's Habit, where that movie is like vampirism is like drug addiction and alcoholism, and there's movies like that which kind of like relate the need for blood with the need for like, you know, drugs and alcohol and other vices. So just give me modern adaptations that are like this. Like I again, you know, here we are, we're 42 minutes in. I don't know if I genuinely, my opinion of Wolfman is I'm somewhere between I liked it and I liked it a lot.
Yeah.
So it's somewhere around like a 6.5, maybe like a 7 for me. So what's weird is like you got this and Nosferatu came out,
Right.
you know, a month apart.
Right.
I walked into Nosferatu with expectations of, oh my God, Robert Eggers, I'm so excited. And I was kind of left with, okay, well, with the exception of Orlok sounding like a Cossack with like an old, Rasputin mustache, I kind of felt like I didn't get a very original movie. It was very Bram Stoker's Dracula. It was a lot of the old Nosferatu stuff with some beautiful cinematography and some great filmmaking, but I just kind of expected more. And so that 7 feels lower than the 7 I'm giving this movie, because what I genuinely loved about this movie was how different it was to every other Wolfman movie I've ever seen. And if we're still doing these reviews 3 years from now, and Leigh Whannell has a Mummy movie coming out, or has a Creature from the Black Lagoon movie coming out, or a Dracula movie coming out, I will be there and I will be excited to see what he does with that material.
Shit, yeah. That Danny, that's a great way to kind of just wrap up the whole fucking discussion right there. I know you got to go to your job. Do you want to like kind of plug? Yeah, okay, don't do that. do you want to basically like explain what we've got going on the channel, what's coming up?
We've done our Werewolves and Wolfmen for a while. We reviewed Horror's Greatest on Shudder. Charlotte and I reviewed the first episode. You and I reviewed episode 2. Next week, we're gonna do episode 3 already happened, and then Tuesday episode 4, and we're gonna do kind of a combo review of episodes 3 and 4 next week.
Yeah.
So that's what we have coming up. And then, unfortunately, we lost one of your favorite filmmakers of all time, David Lynch, and which is interesting in the sense that I had posted on New Year's that, like, instead of just trying to accumulate a quantity of movies this year, I wanted to like focus in on filmmakers who I missed. And I specifically name dropped David Lynch. So I'm going to be going to see Mulholland Drive for the first time in theaters Monday night at IFC Center. So I'm very excited for that. I'll probably throw a short review up on the channel. If you want to talk, if we want to do something David Lynch related and cover some David Lynch movies, that will be the inspiration I need to watch them. So yeah.
Yes. And see, this is a nice way to kind of tie it all together, because they featured David Lynch stuff in the first Horror's Greatest season.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. He's not a horror filmmaker, but he's got some really scary shit in some of his movies and shows. Twin Peaks. All right, well, Danny's got to go to work. It's Saturday morning. We hope you guys enjoyed the review. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel, because he is constantly posting videos, like shorts and stuff like that. And, we'll be back next week with Horror's Greatest. We will see you guys real soon.